Every city on this list was mentioned in one of the most read books in human history, and every single one of them is still there, still standing, still breathing, waiting for you to visit. Most people who read the Bible picture these places as something from another world, ancient, distant, lost to time, but the truth is far more extraordinary than that. Many of the cities that shaped the most powerful stories ever told are still inhabited today. Some of them have been continuously occupied for thousands of years without a single generation abandoning them. Today we visit 15 of them. We start with the ones most people recognize and move towards cities that will genuinely surprise you. Places where the ancient and the modern exist side by side in ways that no museum or documentary can fully prepare you for. And stay with us until the very last city on this list, because it is a place that almost nobody connects to the Bible. A modern European city sitting directly on top of one of the most extraordinary chapters of early Christianity, and the discovery beneath its streets is still ongoing today. Subscribe now if you are new here. City Pulse drops a new destination every week and we are only just getting started. City 1, Jerusalem, Israel. There is no city on earth that carries more weight in a single name than Jerusalem. Mentioned over 800 times across both the Old and New Testaments, this city has been the spiritual center of three of the world's major religions simultaneously for more than 3,000 years. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam each have claims here that are not symbolic but geographical, specific streets, specific stones, specific hilltops that appear in their most sacred texts. The Old City is divided into four quarters, the Jewish, the Christian, the Muslim, and the Armenian, all existing within the same ancient walls, sharing the same alleys, and looking out at the same skyline that holds the Dome of the Rock, the Western Wall, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre within walking distance of each other. The Western Wall draws millions of visitors every year who come to pray and place handwritten notes into the cracks of stones that have stood for 2,000 years. Those notes are collected twice a year and buried on the Mount of Olives, a tradition that has no official origin and no official end. Jerusalem is the city that the entire Bible was building toward from its first pages, and standing inside the Old City for the first time, with all of that history pressing in from every direction, changes something permanently in the way you see the world. City 2, Jericho, West Bank. Jericho does not just claim to be one of the oldest cities in the world. The archaeological evidence beneath its streets makes that claim almost impossible to dispute. Excavations at the ancient mound known as Tel Es Sultan have revealed more than 20 layers of human settlement stacked on top of each other, the oldest dating back approximately 11,000 years. That means people were living in Jericho before the invention of writing, before the wheel, before agriculture had fully developed in most parts of the world. The biblical account of Jericho is one of the most famous stories in the Old Testament, the Israelites circling the city, the priests blowing their trumpets, and the walls falling. The remains of those ancient fortifications can still be seen and walked around today. A natural spring called Ain Es Sultan has been providing fresh water continuously for all of those 11,000 years, making Jericho an oasis in an otherwise arid landscape and explaining why civilization after civilization chose to build on exactly the same patch of ground. Today Jericho is quiet and unhurried, and the contrast between the scale of its history and the calm of its present is one of the most striking things about it. City 3, Bethlehem, West Bank. Bethlehem is a city that the entire Christian world has been picturing since childhood, and what surprises most people when they actually arrive is how small and how human it feels. The Church of the Nativity, built over the site traditionally identified as the birthplace of Jesus, has been standing in some form since the 4th century, making it one of the oldest continuously operating Christian churches in the world. The original structure was commissioned by the Emperor Constantine himself. The entrance to the church is called the Door of Humility. It is so low that every visitor must bow or crouch to enter, regardless of their height or status. The design dates to the medieval period, created partly to prevent horses from being ridden inside, but the symbolic weight it carries has made it one of the most photographed doorways in the world. Bethlehem also appears in the Old Testament as the birthplace of King David, giving the city a significance that predates the Christmas story by approximately 1,000 years. Two extraordinary histories layered into the same streets, the same stones, the same landscape. City 4, Nazareth, Israel. Nazareth is described in the Gospels as the place where Jesus grew up, and the city today is the largest Arab city in Israel, home to over 70,000 people, with a modern skyline surrounding an ancient heart that still draws pilgrims from every corner of the world. The Basilica of the Annunciation is the largest church in the Middle East, standing on the site traditionally identified as the home of the Virgin Mary. The cave beneath the main altar is considered by Christian tradition to be the actual room where the angel Gabriel appeared to her. The old city retains a traditional Arab market that winds through narrow streets lined with spice merchants and bread sellers, where the smells of za'atar and fresh coffee mix with the sound of church bells and calls to prayer in a combination that feels entirely specific to this corner of the world. What the Gospels describe as a small and overlooked town has become one of the most visited cities in the region, which is itself a quiet reversal that the biblical narrative seems almost to have predicted. City 5, Damascus, Syria. Damascus is often described as the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, and the claim has enough historical weight behind it to be taken seriously. It appears in the Bible as far back as the book of Genesis, and the most famous biblical event associated with it is the conversion of Saul of Tarsus on the road leading into the city, a blinding light, a voice, and a transformation that turned one of Christianity's most aggressive persecutors into its most prolific writer. The street called Straight, mentioned in the book of Acts as the location where Saul recovered from that experience, still exists in the old city of Damascus and is still called by its ancient name. Walking it today is one of those rare moments where a biblical detail and a living street become the same thing. The old city is a UNESCO World Heritage Site containing some of the most important examples of Islamic and Byzantine architecture in the Middle East, each era leaving its mark on the same ground, one on top of the other, century after century. City 6, Ephesus, Turkey. Ephesus is an archaeological site near the modern Turkish town of Selçuk, but it belongs on this list because walking through its ruins gives a more vivid sense of what a biblical-era city actually looked like than almost any other place on Earth. At its peak, Ephesus was home to around 200,000 people and was one of the largest cities in the Roman Empire. The Apostle Paul spent nearly 3 years here, longer than almost anywhere else during his missionary journeys, writing his letter to the Ephesians from within these walls. The Temple of Artemis that once stood here was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 4 times larger than the Parthenon in Athens. Only a single reconstructed column remains today, rising from a marshy field beside the road, but it is enough to suggest the scale of what was lost. The Library of Celsus, the great theater that seated 25,000 people, the marble streets, the carved inscriptions. Ephesus is one of the most immersive ancient experiences available anywhere in the world, and the biblical connections are woven into every stone of it. City 7, Thessaloniki, Greece. Thessaloniki is the second largest city in Greece, home to over 1 million people, and most visitors arrive thinking of beaches and food without realizing they are standing in one of the most important cities in early Christian history. The Apostle Paul visited during his second missionary journey and founded a church significant enough for him to write 2 letters to it. The first and second epistles to the Thessalonians are among the earliest writings in the entire New Testament, which means this city can claim to be the recipient of some of the oldest Christian documents in existence. The ancient forum was discovered almost by accident in 1962 when a bus station was relocated and excavations revealed a 1st and 2nd century Roman marketplace directly beneath the modern street level. It now sits open in the center of the city, surrounded by apartment buildings and coffee shops, and that distinctly Greek way of treating ancient history is simply part of the furniture. Thessaloniki is also home to 15 Byzantine churches collectively designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A Roman arch, a Byzantine basilica, and a modern cafe can occupy the same street here, and nobody finds that remarkable. City 8, Hebron, West Bank. Hebron is one of those cities where the weight of what it means to different people is almost physical. You can feel it the moment you arrive. Home to the Cave of Machpelah, known as the Cave of the Patriarchs, this is the site identified in the Bible as the burial place of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah. Considered sacred by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam simultaneously, making it one of the most contested religious sites on earth. The structure built over the cave dates to the time of Herod the Great and is one of the best preserved Herodian buildings in existence. The walls are extraordinary in their scale. Massive limestone blocks fitted together with a precision that has kept them standing for 2,000 years without mortar. Hebron is politically complex and unlike any other city in the region, divided in ways that are visible and felt by every visitor. But the historical and spiritual depth of what exists here is equally undeniable, and the two realities exist side by side without canceling each other out. City 9, Corinth, Greece. Corinth surprises people who arrive expecting something as impressive as Athens. It is a quiet archaeological site in the northern Peloponnese, and most of what the ancient city was has been absorbed by the modern town around it. But what remains is enough to make the biblical story feel suddenly and completely real. The Apostle Paul spent 18 months here, longer than almost anywhere else, and wrote his 2 letters to the Corinthians from war about this place. Those letters contain some of the most famous passages in the New Testament, including the meditation on love in 1 Corinthians 13, written to address the specific problems of a specific community in this specific city. Ancient Corinth had a reputation that Paul's letters reflect directly, wealthy, cosmopolitan, morally complex, and home to the temple of Aphrodite on the hill above. Writing to the Corinthians meant writing to a community living in one of the most complicated cities in the Roman world. 7 columns of the Temple of Apollo still stand in the ruins after nearly 3,000 years, and the bema, the raised platform where Paul is believed to have stood before the Roman governor, is still visible and accessible in the archaeological site today. City 10, Petra, Jordan. Petra is known to most of the world as an archaeological wonder, the rose-red city carved into the sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan. But its connection to the biblical world is older and deeper than most visitors realize. The region surrounding Petra appears in the Bible as the land of Edom, home to the descendants of Esau, and later as the territory of the Nabatean kingdom that controlled trade routes connecting Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. What makes Petra genuinely extraordinary is the scale of what its builders achieved, an entire city carved not from separate blocks of stone but directly from the cliff faces of a canyon, with facades reaching 40 meters in height, and a water management system that channeled rainwater across miles of desert terrain. The narrow canyon passage leading into the city, is over a kilometer long and in some places only a few meters wide. Emerging from it and seeing the treasury facade for the first time is one of the most dramatic architectural reveals available anywhere in the world. And the knowledge that travelers have been experiencing this same moment for 2,000 years adds something that no photograph can fully capture. City 11, Capernaum, Israel. Capernaum is described in the Gospel of Matthew as the city Jesus chose as the base for his ministry, and the ruins on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee are among the most directly connected physical spaces to his life that archaeology has found. The ancient synagogue at the site is built on the foundations of an earlier 1st century structure believed by many scholars to be the synagogue where Jesus taught. The Gospel of Mark describes him there with an authority that astonished the congregation, and the Gospel of Luke records a healing in the same location. The most remarkable discovery is the house beneath the Byzantine church at the center of the site, a 1st century residential structure modified in subsequent generations with Christian inscriptions and pilgrim graffiti. The scholarly consensus is that this was venerated as the house of Simon Peter from very early in Christian history. Capernaum is small, quiet, and manageable. The Sea of Galilee is visible from the ruins, and the landscape has changed relatively little in 2,000 years. It has a quality of presence that larger and more famous sites sometimes struggle to achieve. City 12, Sidon, Lebanon. Sidon, known today as Saida, is a coastal city in southern Lebanon that most Western travelers have never seriously considered, and yet it is one of the oldest cities in the world, mentioned repeatedly in both the Old and New Testaments. In the Old Testament, Sidon is named as one of the great Phoenician cities, and its people were the master craftsmen and traders of their age. Their purple dye, produced from sea snails found in the eastern Mediterranean, was so valuable that the color purple became synonymous with royalty across the ancient world. In the New Testament, Jesus travels to the region of Tyre and Sidon and performs a healing there, one of the relatively rare occasions in the Gospels where his ministry extends beyond Jewish territory. Most visitors to this coastline have no idea they are standing in a place the Gospels describe directly. The old city today retains a Crusader sea castle sitting in the harbor, a covered medieval souk, and layers of history from Phoenician through Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, and Ottoman that are visible in its architecture and its streets. City 13, Tyre, Lebanon. Tyre shares the Phoenician coast with Sidon and appears just as frequently in the biblical texts, but what makes it particularly remarkable is the extraordinary prophetic attention it receives. The prophet Ezekiel devoted 3 full chapters to a detailed prophecy against Tyre, describing armies coming, its stones being thrown into the sea, and the site becoming bare rock used by fishermen to dry their nets. The historical events that followed, including Alexander the Great building a causeway into the sea to reach the island portion of the city, correspond to elements of the prophecy in ways that scholars have debated ever since. That causeway, built over 2,000 years ago as a military engineering project, created the modern peninsula on which the city of Sur now stands. Alexander changed the geography of the coast permanently, almost as a historical accident. The archaeological site at Tyre is a UNESCO World Heritage Site containing some of the best preserved Roman remains in the region, including a hippodrome and colonnaded streets that make the ancient scale of the city genuinely visible. Daily life and ancient history share the same narrow streets along the same Mediterranean shore. City 14, Beersheba, Israel. Beersheba appears in the Bible as the southernmost point of the Promised Land. The phrase from Dan to Beersheba is used repeatedly in the Hebrew Bible to describe the full geographic extent of Israel, which means this city was literally the edge of the biblical world as the ancient writers understood it. The name means either well of the oath or well of seven depending on the interpretation, and the biblical narrative offers both explanations in the same passage. Abraham made a covenant here with the Philistine king Abimelech, planted a tamarisk tree, and called on the name of God. Isaac and Jacob both have significant biblical episodes connected to the same location. The ancient site of Tel Beer-Sheva, a few kilometers from the modern city, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with one of the most complete Iron Age gate complexes ever found in the region. Modern Beersheba is a university city of hundreds of thousands of people with almost nothing visually in common with its ancient identity. The ancient Tel sits on the edge of town while the modern city grows around it, a compressed version of the same story the entire biblical world is still telling. City 15, Thessaloniki Metro Excavations, Greece. And here is the city that almost nobody associates with the Bible, and the discovery beneath its streets that is still unfolding. When construction began on the Thessaloniki Metro in the early 2000s, workers began uncovering what turned out to be one of the most significant urban archaeological discoveries in Europe. Layer after layer of ancient Thessalonica, the very city Paul visited in the 1st century, found directly beneath modern streets. The excavations caused years of delays to the metro project. The choice between preserving what was found and completing the infrastructure became one of the most debated questions in Greece during that period. The solution was to incorporate some of the finds directly into the stations themselves, creating metro stops where passengers wait beside exposed ancient ruins protected behind glass. The most extraordinary moment came when workers uncovered golden wreaths of exceptional craftsmanship dating to the Hellenistic period, just before the Roman era when Paul arrived. The kind of discovery that happens once in a generation. What this means is literal and physical. The streets Paul walked, the forum where he debated, and the community he wrote to are not metaphors in Thessaloniki, they are under the ground, being uncovered season by season, and the city is still in the process of discovering what it has always been sitting on top of. 15 cities, 15 places where the text and the living world are not separated by time but by a short flight, a bus ride, or a walk through a gate in an old stone wall. The Bible is not only a text, it is also a map, and most of the places on that map are still there. That is what City Pulse is here to show you, one city at a time, every single week. We will see you in the next one.